The picture of tension between the US and China has never been hotter than it is right now. However, a shocking piece of information has just stirred up public opinion. The Chinese delegation left in the middle of an important meeting with the US just because of an unfinished sentence? Is this the end of these negotiations, or is it just a drama that confuses public opinion? What is the truth behind this story, and who really suffers in this tariff war? The story started with a photo posted on social networks, causing everything to be chaotic. The photo shows Chinese Deputy Prime Minister He Lifeng walking to the car, and the caption under the photo said that Mr. Lef in the middle of negotiations with the US. Immediately, this information spread widely, making many people think that US-China negotiations have collapsed right from the start. But when we look at the story from another perspective, things are not like that. This important meeting took place on May 10, 2025 in Switzerland, where the two superpowers, America and China, sat together under the roof of the World Trade Organization, WTO. In the first minutes, America offered the FOMC. The conditions are quite strict, requiring China to make a series of changes if it wants to be considered for tariff reduction. But then, an unexpected moment happened. The Chinese delegation suddenly stood up and left the meeting room right in the middle of the American side's speech. And so, a wave of speculation began. People thought that the negotiations were over, a failed dialogue. However, the truth is much simpler. After a few minutes of brief exchange outside the meeting room, the two sides decided to return to the negotiating table, continuing the longer conversation 2 hours in the morning before taking a break for lunch. What happened was far different from what the rumors spread. Chen Wei, head of Office of China Daily in the EU, immediately rejected this information, affirming that the Chinese delegation did not leave and everything went according to plan. Furthermore, Swiss Minister Guy Parmelin also confirmed that negotiations were not interrupted and may continue until May 12 if necessary. So, while social networks were abuzz with sensational stories, the US-China negotiations continued normally. The initial tensions are just part of the negotiation process, and much remains to be revealed. To be sure, this is just a typical example. In the world of politics, things are not always what they seem on the surface. The tariff war between the US and China is becoming a fierce, prolonged, and uncompromising confrontation. Things started to become more tense than ever when the US imposed tariffs of up to 145% on goods imported from China. That is a huge number, making every item from electronics, clothing, to production materials become much more expensive. A cell phone or a normal set of clothes suddenly has a sky-high price, causing not only businesses but also consumers a headache. But China is not an easy opponent. They immediately counterattacked with a 125% tariff on American goods. This tariff war is truly tit for tat, and no one is willing to give in to anyone else. Previously, the tax rate proposed by the US was only about 80%. But now, with such sky-high tax rates, both of the world's largest economies are suffering strong shocks. Not only that, this tariff war also entails significant negative impacts on the global economy. The World Trade Organization, WTO, has issued a serious warning. If the world economy continues to split into competing blocks, global GDP could decrease by up to 7%. That is a huge number, and will certainly have a significant impact on countries that do not participate directly in this war. If major economies divide and do not cooperate with each other, the whole world will face an unstable future, and there is another consequence that cannot be ignored. International businesses are forced to pass on the increased costs of tariffs to consumers. This means consumers will have to pay higher prices for daily essential products. From clothes and home appliances to food and electronics, everything will cost more. And as prices rose, inflation began to escalate, pushing things out of control. As for the US, the reduction in imports from China causes a shortage of goods and at the same time pushes up domestic prices. American consumers not only face more expensive prices, but also suffer shortages of goods. Everyday items, from a shirt to a phone, have now become expensive products, reducing people's quality of life. Ultimately, it cannot be denied that this tariff war is not just a confrontation between the US and China. It has turned into a global problem, deeply affecting all of us, Regardless of whether you are a consumer in any country or a business in an international supply chain, you will feel the effects of this war. And the big question is, can things calm down, or will it only escalate, costing us all? From the beginning, China showed a tough stance in the negotiations. They affirmed that they do not accept negotiations under the pressure of tariffs. The Chinese delegation requested that the US remove tariff barriers before discussing further issues. In addition, China demands fairness in negotiations, asserting that both sides must benefit from this agreement. There cannot be only one side that wins and the other side that loses. They want everything to happen on an equal and mutually beneficial basis. Initially, the US seemed tougher, making harsh demands and not giving in easily. However, after reactions from China and to avoid collapsing the negotiations, the US quickly adjusted its strategy. They decided to allow open discussions with no time limit, which could even last until May 12 if needed. In particular, the US proposed a temporary solution, which is to reduce tariffs to 20% if there is progress on issues related to fentanyl and intellectual property, two issues that the US considers very important. A special point in this negotiation is the change in the structure of the US negotiating team. The US government sent a new negotiating team, less prone to hawkish views, and instead experts focused on the effectiveness of the agreements. This reflects an adjustment in US strategy, wanting to reduce tensions without losing its advantage. The Chinese side is also ready to adjust its stance. They will likely bring in drug control representatives to discuss fentanyl, an issue of great concern to the US. This shows that China is not only interested in trade, but also wants to find cooperative solutions on non-trade issues, helping to reduce tensions between the two sides. Another notable point is that both sides are aiming to separate non-trade issues from goods trade issues. This helps them reduce tensions, avoiding sensitive issues from having too much of an impact on discussions about tariffs or official trade agreements. In short, these negotiations are gradually opening up opportunities for reducing tensions, although there are still many challenges ahead. But clearly, both sides are looking for ways to compromise without losing their strategic interests. Surely you can see clearly the tax battle between the US and China is no longer there. It's a matter of politicians sitting around the negotiating table. It has crept into every supermarket, every factory, every number of shopping invoices, and both sides, no matter how strong, are suffering painful blows. In Guangdong, Shenzhen, or Hangzhou, the world factories bustling with machines every day and every hour are no longer as bustling as before. Since the US began raising tariffs on a series of Chinese products, currently reaching a record level, 145%, the number of orders has clearly decreased. Many small businesses, which are only used to outsourcing work for American companies, have suddenly lost their main source of revenue. Some places had to lay off workers, some places closed temporarily to wait for the situation to get better. But no one knows how long to wait. Beijing, of course, does not sit still. Surname, tough statement. China will not bow to pressure from Washington. But at the same time, they are also silently rotated, pushing companies to find new markets in Southeast Asia, Africa, even Latin America. The goal is to gradually reduce dependence on the US market, gradually rebuilding a new balance. Meanwhile, on the other side of the hemisphere, American consumers are not happy either. From small items like t-shirts, kettles, to electronic devices in the home, everything starts getting more expensive, not because the seller wants to increase prices, but because the cost of importing goods has increased due to high taxes. Many items that used to cost just a few dollars are now worth 1.5 times more. And when you add up all those slight price increases, the bill at the end of the month is enough to make many people tighten their wallets. American businesses are no better. Importers, accustomed to cheap, stable sources of goods from China, now have to find ways to deal with high costs, but do not dare to push it all towards customers. Result? Profits dropped, business plans had to be adjusted, and personnel were cut. Knowing that things cannot continue like this forever, the US government started looking for new partners. They opened negotiations with Britain, India, and some other countries to quickly find alternative sources of goods to China. But that's not easy. It's both time-consuming and poses risks to quality and the supply chain. In short, this tariff war has no real winners, at least for now. China is out of breath in exports, and America is struggling because of rising prices. But neither of them has given up yet, and while they are still struggling at the negotiating table, people and businesses on both sides are still having to endure each blow. The story of the Chinese delegation leaving halfway turned out to be just a rumor, sparked by a hastily taken photo and a few unverified captions. There was indeed a moment where the atmosphere was as tense as a string. The Chinese side stood up right in the middle of America's presentation, making many people think they were leaving. But the truth is that after a quick exchange outside, the two sides returned to the table again, continuing the conversation that lasted more than 2 hours. So no, negotiations have not broken down. Both are still trying to find common ground, although they don't know where it will go. But to be honest, the situation right now is like walking on a tightrope. All it takes is one slip of the tongue, one harsh tweet, or one disturbing article. All efforts can go up in smoke in the blink of an eye. The Chinese side does not want to be forced to step down amid tax pressure. And the US, although softening its tone, still sets tough conditions related to the drug fentanyl and intellectual property rights. Neither side wants to be the first to give in, but neither side has the strength to completely break the unsteady bridge of dialogue between the two banks of tension. The next stage is the real test, not only for the bargaining ability of both parties, but also a test of patience, long-term strategy, and the courage to stay calm before the storm. And like all major political games, watchers can't be sure what will happen. But one thing is certain, all eyes are watching. Every small gesture, every handshake, every word that can and cannot be uttered in that private meeting room. Finally, although the initial information confused many people, the truth is completely different. Negotiations between the US and China continue, and tensions are just an indispensable part of a difficult negotiation process. Although the future is uncertain, it is clear that both sides are still trying to find solutions to avoid a full-blown confrontation. This story is not over yet, and there are many surprises ahead. Let's wait and see whether patience and skillful strategy will help them overcome the challenge.